Third plate we want to put on our scales is people. And that's why on page 9 it says pursue God's people. If you have a problem and you want to move that problem to freedom from a problem, especially in the area of sexual integrity, you got to surround yourself with the right people. How many of you have seen The Castaway with Tom Hanks? Okay, God bless you, the most painful movie Hollywood has ever made. It's one man, he's on an island 90% of the movie, he talks to a volleyball and beats his chest. And he survives a plane crash. Okay, but you know, the plot is Hollywood, all Hollywood, right? He's in a 747, he's, FedEx's, Johnny on the spot guy. He's trying to have relationships, but he's always in a hurry, and he's a slave to his beeper, and he gets called, during Christmas time to take a flight to go solve some worldwide mail problem across the ocean. He's sitting in the jet, and it starts shaking, and it goes down. A 747 goes down from 40,000 feet in the air, and he lives. Okay, so he lives. He washes up on shore, right? Oh, there's the pilot. He's washed up. He's dead, but not Tom Hanks. There's a volleyball. There's a couple FedEx packages, Anyway, Tom Hanks enters his odyssey, as the castaway. So 5 years later, he builds a boat out of coconuts and bamboo, and he gets rescued. Okay? Why couldn't the people on Gilligan's Island do that? But he gets rescued. He goes back to Helen Hunt, who was his main squeeze before he crashed, and she's now married. But anyway, he says, what happened? So she goes up into the attic, dusts off the old, blueprints, right? And they said, well, when we went, she puts out the blueprints of the search, from 5 years ago, secures the borders, and she says, well, your flight plan was going this way, but the hurricane or the storm caused you to tack at 500 miles off track for a long time. So the rescue grid was here, but you were all the way over here, and that's why we missed you. So no communication, off track, no rescue. Now, let's talk about you. Any communication? Flying through life at 500 miles an hour? Get into a little storm? You're supposed to be here, but you've drifted all the way over here, and there's no rescue if there's no contact, no reporting, and if you're off track. And you know what I see, guys, in the lives of men? I see men who are spiritual castaways. They've lost communication. They get stuck in a storm of life. Life keeps moving forward. Their heart keeps drifting. Their lives keep drifting. And they're all alone and they're isolated, as Bruce discussed. And then when they go down in the middle of that storm, there's no one to rescue them. And then they have to go through this odyssey, which they're ashamed to talk about and ashamed to involve anybody with. And emotionally, the pressure and the anxiety of dealing, with this odyssey, when all along, if they were connected and reporting and communicating and in relationship with the few other guys who cared for them, that whole odyssey could have been avoided. In fact, it could have been mitigated on the front end, and they wouldn't have had to go through all that pain. You see, guys, the Bible says that we need male relationships in our lives if we're going to become God's man and win our battles. Let's read 2 Timothy 2:22 together. Pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call upon the Lord out of a pure heart. Now, circle with those. That's a connective phrase. You see, the front end of that phrase is, hey, I want you to be God's man. This is a message from one God's man to another God's man. It's from Paul to Timothy, and he's saying, hey, go for it. I mean, with gusto, pursue that righteousness stuff, to do the right things, to live the right life, faith, love, and peace. Guess what? You can't do it by yourself. You got to do it with a pack. What kind of pack? Well, other people who call upon the Lord out of a pure heart. Let's read 1 Corinthians 12:21 together. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you, and the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. If you're new to the Bible talks about the spiritual family like a body. Okay? And let's just say, for example, you're like a finger. Okay? Now, if I just take a nice pair of pliers and snip off my finger and it lands on the floor, the finger doesn't move. The finger has to be connected to the joints and to the tendons and to the neurobiology of my brain in order to have function. Okay? Well, Paul is saying that, this part, can't say to this part, I'm just going to be this part, apart from this part. Okay? It's called a body. Genius. I'm so glad that God gave us a way of understanding relationships as a spiritual family and as men that we could get. But guys, we act like the I and say, you know what, I don't need you, and I don't need you, and we become, like the Marlboro man or the independent man or the self-sufficient man, which in and of itself is a pretty good quality, but not to have a healthy relationship with God and healthy relationships with people. It's great maybe if you're starting a business and you have that stick-to-itiveness and you're independent, self-sufficient driver. Great, good for you. But not for spiritual growth, and not for relationships, and not for personal change. That whole mentality fails.